Hello everyone, my name is Call and I am a somatic therapist as well as an astrological counselor. And I also help individuals and couples along their sexual journeys. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about the sign of Virgo and Virgo's sexual superpower. Now when I'm talking about sexual superpowers, um, there's a kind of uniformity actually that occurs through all the signs, which is the movement from subjectivity and subjective experience to a more objective experience. And what do I mean by that? Another way to kind of put that would be the instinctual approach to life, meaning one that is unconscious, to the approach which is more aware, more objective, more neutral, and has the ability to discriminate. So, and that is the pathway, and the pathway ultimately is leading towards a connection to one's soul. Now, the reason this is important to understand is that every one of us, on a deep level, has a connection to spirit. When I'm talking about spirit, I'm talking about prana, chi. I'm talking about that sort of larger aspect of life force that is moving through us, animating our existence. And the application of consciousness or awareness, which then illuminates that pathway. Uh, Now, this is an inward journey. Now, with Virgo, well, the other thing I should say about this is that each sign has a very unique journey along this particular pathway. And because sexual energy uh, evolves as the individual evolves, that's why I've created these series of videos to show us how sexual energy will reflect the general evolution of the individual, the sexual choices we make, how we enjoy sex, how we engage in sex. All those things also transform and change. And each sign is a little bit different in terms of what their particular pathway is. Now, with Virgo, I found Virgo was fun actually for me to kind of understand. I'm a Pisces, so I'm like on the other side of the zodiac, and so I've kind of always gotten along with Virgos, but I don't understand Virgos. So there's something that is learned through the polarities. And as I mature as a Pisces person, I start to understand the polarity of Virgo quite a bit more. And actually, my research for this video was quite helpful in this regard. So the thing with Virgo here is that Virgo's general path, when I'm talking about this from a level of immaturity to maturity. So immature Virgo is subjective and indiscriminate. Indiscriminate is the best way to say this. So it is ruled by Mercury. Mercury is the sign that seeks to ultimately blend through, blend or create synthesis through duality, though. And like in Gemini, which is also ruled by Mercury, it was more of a sort of function of the intellect. And it's not to say that Virgo isn't also intellectually sharp, they are, but it's different. The the movement is between more along the material plane. So it's dealing with physical things. It's dealing with the movement from wanting this stuff to that stuff, or having an idea and the movement from this idea to that idea. And so there's always this movement back and forth, back and forth, and back and forth. And like I said, as long as it's happening on the instinctual level, what we're going to get is we're going to get the negative feedback from that process. In the case of Virgo, it could be accumulation of too many items, too much stuff. It could be also the chaotic mind. So there's this movement from chaos to clarity that happens in the sign of Virgo as they mature. So, so we have at an immature stage, it's cluttered, cluttered thoughts, cluttered emotions. Everything's a mess. and, and any of you who know a lot of Virgos, I know a few, um, there's some messiness involved. And in those Virgos who are watching this, you know there's some messiness, particularly when you were younger. So now this messiness is, how do I say it's there for a purpose. The messiness, this sort of the externalizing of one's energy, the looking outside of oneself, it could lead to um, like I said, this accumulation of clutter, but it's really about the avoidance of one's void, I guess, the avoidance of the void. It's about being afraid or having fear or anxiety about turning inward. So we end up going to the outside world in order to find solutions. We may change jobs, or we may constantly change locations of where we live, or getting this stuff and that stuff. So this is the classic sign, in my opinion, of the sort of trap that many materialists get stuck into, which is this: you can never fulfill the void. You can't fill that void. The only way to fill the void is by essentially becoming the void. And through becoming the void, you eventually discover the totality of everything, what is universal, and the universality of, I don't know if that's a word, but that part of Virgo's path is to recognize what is universal amongst humanity, because that's where their focus is. It's this movement towards service. So what happens sexually at this stage, at this immature stage? Well, a couple of things I could see. Mostly I see is a lot of hedonism. I see a lot of like indiscriminate sex. I see a lot of shallow sex. I see a lot of just, again, a lot of void filling. And again, this could cause a lot of drama in relationships. It could cause all sorts of, these people would cheat in their relationships. They could do all sorts of things, again, because they're always being selfish. And that selfishness begins when they refuse to turn inward and to acknowledge how they're projecting their cluttered inner world out into the world and creating chaos and clutter around them. So, how does this evolve? So, this evolves into a more objective space. So, as Virgo evolves, it moves into a more discriminating place. It starts to make choices. And so, one of the other stereotypes about Virgos is perfectionism. So, whereas before, this sort of attention to detail, which I would say Virgo is pretty well known for, where the attention to detail before, this obsession with like little things before, was more about sort of avoiding oneself. Now, as they evolve and they become a more aware, conscious person through meditation, qigong, tai chi, whatever your path may be, what you end up discovering is that you start to refine things, which is different than fixating on details, right? So the refinement that is happening is, oh, is this job really true? Is this true to my soul? Is this what really works for me? These items, all these things that I've accumulated in the past, are those really truly serving me? So what I see in this sort of intermediary kind of intermediate phase, it's a better word, intermediate phase between personality and more of a soul-centered individual for Virgo. What you get in between is this sort of oscillation. It's an oscillation from feeling full to empty. So it's this movement from full to empty. So you can see some even as you're gaining objectivity, there's this very uncomfortable period of time that pretty much all the astrology signs go through in their sort of intermediate phase. But with Virgo, I feel like it's really profound. I feel like it's a very profound, deep place where they have to realize that there's certain things that they're not getting anything out of. It's not working for them. So in their sort of sexual dynamics, they could say, "Hey, I was being incredibly indiscriminate before. I was having all this sex or doing all this kinky shit, or excuse me, and all sorts of different activities, and a lot of it didn't work. It just didn't work for me." So what they end up realizing is what doesn't work and what works, and what serves them and fulfills them, and what leaves them feeling empty. And this is a necessary oscillation, is this movement back and forth. And again, you see this oscillation with pretty much all the mutable signs, except in the case of Virgo, it's an oscillation on the material level because it's an earth sign. So we're dealing with I would say the material triangle, which is a downward facing triangle in which you have the lower mind, or the kind of like the rational mind, the emotions, and the physical, all this is being transformed. It's being transformed, and we're learning how to not get stuck in that downward facing triangle, and we're learning how to ascend into an upward facing triangle, which is the movement towards spirit. And so that is part of the process. Sorry, that's a little esoteric, but uh, so what ends up happening here as Virgo begins to the refinement process? So the refinement process is really interesting for Virgo because eventually it becomes this kind of classic. To me, this is very I don't want to use the term Buddha, but this is very classic. That sort of letting go of the material, letting go of the physical, and that deep, deep, deep understanding that it's not going to fulfill you. So as Virgo finally reaches the point where it can connect to their soul, it can see how the will of spirit is truly motivating them, and they surrender to that. They can see how the will of spirit is here to do something, here to move through them so they can serve humanity, and they can help guide humanity towards that which is universal. And that is the blending that happens. So they become very nurturing and extremely caring individuals. I know many Virgos who are more mature, and they have that level of awareness, and it's absolutely true. They become extremely nurturing, extremely service oriented. Um, in a bit like the sign of Cancer in some ways, in that they start to want to mother things, and so that is basically Virgo. So now, how does this translate sexually? So on the sort of most refined level, Virgo sexually becomes, I would say, like, probably an amazing lover. In terms of like incredibly caring, incredibly discerning. Uh, they're going to then choose the correct partners, because part of that sort of process for Virgo is becoming kind of persnickety and kind of picky. There's a pickiness to Virgos. And so that pickiness is absolutely perfect in that sort of intermediary phase where they're learning to discriminate in life. But at this stage, they know, they're intuitive. They connect to spirit, and spirit says that person is correct or that person is not. In the language and how spirit communicates to them, maybe through just a sense of knowing, like I said, a deep sense of knowing, a gut instinct, or, maybe a vision. There's a number of ways in which Virgo may know at this point. But again, what you're looking at here is individuals who have the capacity to go into a deep, caring, giving, service-oriented kind of space. They will be, like I said, the ultimate lover for someone who really needs to absorb that love. So with all that said, I appreciate you watching this video. Thank you much.